Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting is on Wednesday, March 15th at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. Hard to believe we're already marching toward March tomorrow. So thank you. I hope everyone had a good break. I hope people got some R&R. Just a note on the snow day today. Julie, thank you for that. I wanted to cut the budget on salt and plowing, and here we are now. So we're expecting a Venmo to the budget. Just, you always get emails and phone calls about the process, and it is a process that Dr. Adley and the superintendents across through, and it's always nice if you can call it in the evening so you don't have to deal with the 5:30 or 5 a.m. phone calls. So, but just everyone needs to keep in mind too, it's about the busing. It's about the folks that have to travel to the bus depot from out of town. It's about our staff that has to travel from out of town. So it's not just about us in town and the couple of miles that we have to travel and the phenomenal work that our town maintenance folks do. It's, a lot of components that go into that discussion. So I just thought it's worth noting, and it's always about the safety of our staff and our students. So with that, Michelle, we will move over to public comment.
Good evening. If anyone in person has comment, please wait for the chair to acknowledge you. You'll have up to 3 minutes to comment. Please state your name and address. Anyone in person?
We will start in person. Sure.
Good evening. So it's Rob Dyer from McLaren Road South. Value formation in kids is a tricky business, right? It's the sole purview and authority of parents, but we delegate that authority willingly to lots of people. And we don't do that without some responsibility for making sure that we're aligned. And I want to focus on one very small corner, and hopefully something a little easier than many of the value formation discussions that we've been having as a community, and looks like we're going to continue to have for a long time potentially. And that is captaincy selection process in varsity sports. Leadership is an adult concept to me. Leadership is not something kids are born with. Leadership is something that's exemplified on and off the field. Leadership is an adult concept that adults should be involved in. The way we select captains in the public school system is a secret ballot popularity contest from the players on the team, which means that the coach doesn't have any input. The assistant coaches who have been with these boys and girls their whole life, who know whether they exemplify leadership on and off the field, have no input. In fact, when there's infractions to the code, the C is not even suspendable or removable by the coach. And so what we've really done is neutered the coach in the process of exemplifying or trying to solidify leadership by creating a process that really, I think, makes our lives a little too easy. And so my idea is that if we're going to have 3 or 4 captains, that we put back the coach's ability to pick 1 or 2 of them, because the coach obviously has an incentive to demonstrate leadership in the sport and the knowledge of leadership. We've had many examples where kids have been arrested who are captains. Other captains haven't played in the sport which they are a captain. Others have been feeding alcohol to the freshmen to be selected as captain. These are not things that I think are good examples in the value system that we're trying to create here. So I ask you, Dr. Adley, because I think you're the person who has to make this decision, to address and potentially redo a process that has arrived at this point to something that is more akin to actual leadership.
Thank you. Thanks for speaking. We'll move on to Zoom, Michelle.
If anyone in Zoom would like to participate in public comment, please use the raised hand option. You will have 3 minutes to comment. Please state your name and address. Jamie Zionic, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, Jamie Zionic, 15 Holmes Court. I'm speaking to ask that the BOE Policy Committee review the SEL ruler data collection policy on retention and distribution of student data. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking. Anyone else on Zoom?
There are no more raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Adley.
Yes, good evening, everybody, and welcome back. And again, a special thank you to our 2 students for coming out on this snow day. Congratulations. We had about 46 students in the Authentic Science Research Program at the high school who participated in the Connecticut STEM Fair over the last 2 Saturdays. There was 46 high school students. 15 high schools were represented, and about 350 students overall were in the competition. Projects were evaluated in 4 categories: health and medical sciences, physical sciences, environmental sciences, and behavioral sciences. The topics of these kids are just unbelievable in terms of the topics. If you've ever had the chance to see some of the fairs of the science research program. We're pleased to announce that a number of our high school students earned top prizes. There were 3 first prizes, 4 second prizes, and 3 first, 4 second, and 1 third place prize. I'll share the names I'll recognize the names of the students individually, as opposed to reading them all out this evening. But I want to congratulate all of our students who participated, and also to Mr. Lewis, who's our science teacher, for facilitating. We'll also wish good luck to the high school robotics team. By the time we meet again, they will have participated at Waterbury on Friday and a Saturday weekend as part of their first competition. Since we did have a snow day today, the current last day for students is Wednesday, June 14th. The board typically will set their graduation date, and for the parents, just for informational purposes, at the March 28th board meeting. Last night at the Board of Selectmen, they approved the $817,000 appropriation for the new high school track. So we thank Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance for moving that forward. That's very helpful. The Board of Education budget has been posted on the website, so that's live for people. P&Z is meeting tonight to discuss an amendment to, I think it was the 2016 special permit that allowed Suburbans to park here. So we want to extend from 4 Suburbans to 6 Suburbans. The board is aware of that in the actual budget. So since we're here tonight, they're having that discussion over at P&Z. We submitted our reading waiver today to the state. We've been following that process. I want to thank Mrs. Droller, Director of Elementary Education in particular, for her leadership and hard work on this major project and task. I have submitted testimony to the Education Committee, both to extend the timeline. Given that what we requested before, they actually put in an amendment to the bill to extend the timeline, but I'm also asking, in the event that a waiver is not granted by the State Department of Education for any district, since there's time now built in to allow the districts to be given feedback and address the area of potential deficiency, as opposed to having to buy and purchase and jump on board one of the 7 approved programs. Thriving Youth Task Force, we did distribute the surveys to parents before the break. That was on Thursday. That was one of 2 communications that I sent out. So that will be for grade 6 through 12. They will be administered to students in March 6th through the 10th. And there's a quick survey, 5-minute survey for parents. I might actually just send out a wee reminder to parents again, just about that particular survey. And there's certainly an opt-out opportunity. The results of that survey is also going to support the mental health task force that was established. So that they will have, that will be used to inform some of their actions moving forward. The SEL website, the elementary resource books that are on our website, they have been reviewed, and they had that site now is being revised and is live with the resources that can be used by teachers. We have made some amendments, and some books have come off that list. But that we, for parents who have been inquiring, we have shared that we would make that live today, and that's live at the moment, so that people will have an opportunity to look at the books that are on the website. A presentation from the Board of Ed to the Board of Finance is next Tuesday night, Mr. Chairman, on March 7th. And then it's followed by public comment on the budget on March 14th. Just so as you hear, just timeline wise, the March elementary conferences are around the corner, 15, 16, 17 to parents. And the tour of the schools is March 18th. And those are my announcements. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. We'll move on to student representative reports. Swaha.
Okay. By the way, thank you for the snow day. We enjoyed that. The girls hockey team just won FCX, and the boys squash just won the Fair West League, and they will be heading to Philadelphia for finals. And they're seeded D1 for the first time in program history.
Thank you. John.
On March 9th, all choirs in the district from 6-12 have a masterclass clinic, which will be fun. The same day that the 100-day dinner will be held, that's also Thursday the 9th at DHS and the CAF. And again, Newsies opens on March 16th. So
Sold out?
we hope to see you all there. Not yet. So please buy your tickets before it sells out.
Julie will make sure it's sold out. Good, that's exciting. Thank you both very much, and thanks for being here this evening on your day off. We'll move on to approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on February 14th, 2023. Julie, second by Dennis. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to any board committee reports. John?
We had a finance committee meeting, forgot the date, but 2 Thursdays ago.
Yeah.
The Thursday before the break Thursday. And I believe Rich is going to be running us through some of the transfers that we basically approved through the budgeting process to allow the pre-purchases of some of the items.
Thank you. Anything else? Julie?
Thank you. The Communications Committee met on February 15th.
So my meeting was the 14th.
No, yours is the 16th.
Yours was on Valentine's Day.
And there will be an email coming to all of you with that spreadsheet we talked about to populate to kind of get a read on communications that exist right now. And things are moving along there. We're working on developing a research plan.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to presentations and discussions. We will start off with curriculum updates on math, acceleration, and gifted education. Dr. Tran.
You all seem far away tonight. Good evening, everyone. This is a presentation that's a follow-up from the Gifted Education Program Evaluation from June of 2021. Math Acceleration is broken out, even though it was part of that initial program evaluation. Math Acceleration is not limited to only students who are identified as gifted. So it kind of broke apart from those initial recommendations, hence the title of this. So tonight's session is broken down into some of the prioritized considerations. If you remember back to that report, there were considerations based on each section of the program evaluation, but there were also priorities. So these are some of the priorities that we've been working on since that initial presentation. And as always, just making a connection to our mission and vision of preparing all students today to thrive in a changing world tomorrow. So a little bit about the why behind the program evaluation for gifted education. There were some questions just about overall program quality, and those were somewhat connected to the Achievers program, because a lot of this conversation started when we were in the fall, and there were some questions about extending that program to a year and establishing credit, and you might recall that conversation. There was a desire for recommendations for programmatic improvement and also to address the declining enrollment or the inconsistent enrollment of the Achievers program at the high school. So we had an independent program evaluator who was an administrative intern. We also worked in consultation with Nicole Waikunis, who is on the staff at the Renzulli Center for Gifted Education and Talent Development at the University of Connecticut. So the program evaluation included focus groups, interviews, surveys, classroom observations, and a document review. And I'll get into some of the highlights. One of the prioritized considerations really isn't the middle school schedule, but it was access to the middle school program. So students who are in the IDEA program at the middle school access the program during their lunchtime. And that was not a favorable time to access the program from the student perspective who participated. The teachers don't love it, and the parents didn't love it. However, there are some barriers that we're facing, and those include in our 6th grade, we have double ELA, and we have daily world language, and those are pretty unique to Darien. Most districts at the middle school don't have daily world language and don't have a double English in 6th grade. The lunch, it looks like a strange barrier, but we have a relatively small cafeteria for the number of students that have to eat lunch in the school. So we have several lunch periods. And there is a desire to avoid a pullout for providing students access to the program. So right now, the scheduling committee reconvened. If we can think way back to the last scheduled presentation we had from the middle school was in the spring of 2020. Principal Summers at the time proposed this idea of electives. And that's still a desirable thing because we have staffing capacity for electives, but we have space limitation related to electives. So that's the battle that we continue to face. But that committee has reconvened and they're hoping to make a proposal so we can see some changes for access to not only this program at another time during the day, but also other electives starting in the fall of 2024. The Achievers program, we're calling it sunsetting the program effective next year. We did have an initial proposal to be 1 year out, but we are in a good spot to get on top of the curriculum that we need to do to make sure we are revamping the middle school just a little faster than we thought we were going to. At the high school level, we do still want to think of opportunities for students who are or were in the program in the earlier years to be able to convene together because we know one of the benefits of gifted education programs are giving time for students with their like-minded peers. So we're looking at that as an opportunity. The identification process. So there is a gifted steering committee. The formation of the gifted steering committee was also a prioritized consideration from the program evaluation. So that was formed and it includes parents, we have student representation, we have staff who are part of the IDEA program. We also have general education staff and administration who have been working together. One of their priorities for the rest of this year is really looking at not only our current identification process for gifted, but we also don't have a gifted and talented program. Right now, we just have a program for academically gifted. So we're looking at talent specifically related to music, visual arts, and STEM, and they're going to explore best practices and how we might identify. As you know, there's specific state legislation that talks about having identification processes for gifted, but they're pretty wide open. They just have to exist. The other piece with the identification process is reviewing the referral process for identification on off years. So we have screeners in years for grades 3 and 5, but parents can request an evaluation in other years. Those evaluations can take up to 6 hours per student. And that's a lot of time for our teachers to be evaluating students and not providing services to the students who are in the program. So we're trying to think about other ways to look at that process in those off years. The big piece that came in throughout was overall curriculum enhancement. So we're looking at professional development, project-based learning. So we have some of that coming in the spring. And we are beginning with the middle school because through the program evaluation, the middle school program received the most feedback and concerns about what the actual program looked like for students and how they experienced their learning there. And that was also reinforced by the students. As far as math acceleration, as I mentioned, math acceleration is not limited to students who are identified as gifted, but the population of parents, whether it was through the DAEG and just over the years, parents in general desiring for opportunities for students to not have to wait until what we call the double accelerated math program at the middle school for the students to receive that high level of challenge. So this quote here pretty much captures the spirit of those comments that we heard over time. And we, as a committee, we had a separate committee from the gifted steering. We had a math acceleration team. And we really looked at these 3 lanes of differentiation, curriculum compacting, and acceleration. So acceleration is, as it sounds, it's moving faster through the curriculum, moving faster through grade level standards. The idea of curriculum compacting is focusing on the current grade level standards, but potentially going through enrichment or going deeper with those grade level standards within that grade. And then differentiation is providing all of the students in front of you with high quality differentiation through the planning, the actual delivery of instruction, and the assessment. So those are the 3 areas that we focused on. There is a full report that the committee put together that's linked in the memo of the packet if you would like to read that, but it goes into greater detail of just the general program objectives and the theory of action that we use to guide ourselves through the process. There's quite a bit of literature on this idea of acceleration, and the literature is often in the genre of tracking. And we wanted to send a message that we're not creating tracks. We wanted to create a program that students can access. We've been calling them on-ramps and off-ramps. The literature that we looked at was really in these 5 buckets, so to speak, about mastery, moving to the next level once it is demonstrated. And that ties into this idea of equity, is when a student has mastered a concept, they don't need to stay right there with everyone else if they're ready to move at a faster rate. If students need more support within the given unit, we're going to give them that support in this model. So this is the timeline that we followed starting in fall of 2021. And here we are in winter of 2023 with our presentation. And I'll go into detail of some of what we did. So we did a walkthrough of our own practices here. We did a review of literature, and that is the research that exists, not only in the idea of tracking, but we looked at accelerated learners and programming that is ideal for a group of accelerated learners. We completed site visits in other districts. 2 members of the committee were on tri-state visits that focused on math. We did collegial consultancies, and we had a math consultancy with one of our professional development providers. And so the recommendations that we have are in relation to differentiation, curriculum compacting, and acceleration, as you might expect. And the way that we are getting there is to first transition our curriculum into the EduPlanet 21 platform. We want to next year do some pilot of compacting and also establish a vertical math team. We already have teachers and administrators who have volunteered to be part of that team. We're not only a vertical math team, but we're looking at vertical teaming in general related to curriculum across disciplines. And then looking ahead, we want to get to a place where we are doing full acceleration. And this phasing in is very intentional, because if you do too many things at once, you are going to have so many different levels happening at once. And that idea of on-ramps and off-ramps will just become unmanageable for students and teachers very quickly. So this process is pretty thoughtful and methodical, and it will get us to a place, hopefully, where students will be challenged and accelerating when they're ready to accelerate, and not be faced with the need to ever have to double accelerate, with the theory that if students are ready to all of a sudden double accelerate, they may not have been appropriately challenged at an earlier time in the curriculum. And so here are some of our next steps. And we are at a place now that this was 2 separate presentations for our curriculum committee. And when that committee was designed, the idea was, when ideas are big, so these are 2 big things, the gifted program evaluation and math acceleration, that we would provide an update to the full board. So these were both discussed really as the primary topic of 2 meetings over the fall and the winter. And we're here to provide an update, answer any questions, and hopefully have your support as we move forward with recommendations from the gifted program evaluation and proceeding with acceleration as presented in this report.
Thank you, Dr. Tranberg. Board questions and comments. Tara.
So I shouldn't have questions, being that I've already sat through these, but I do anyway. One, can you explain the vertical team?
The vertical team. So a vertical team just is representation from all levels. So we have right now you have a middle school math team, you have a high school department, and you have elementary teachers in math. This creates representation from all of those levels. So you have a group that looks vertically at what does the curriculum look like across the entire spectrum.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And then also back to the gifted, because I know we talked about the issue of parental recommendations before the screeners start. And I understand not wanting to do a screener in first grade for the entire community. But what about offering a day that the screener could be administered, that parents that want to recommend their students can sign up for it? Therefore, it is done on one day instead of these.
The hard part about it is it's not like a test where students just take it. It actually has to be administered, often one-on-one, because you're actually asking questions, listening to students respond, because creativity is such an important part of the identification process. There's an open-endedness to the response.
So the first grade, so doing an OLSAT at the first grade is different than doing an OLSAT
It's different
at
every,
third.
it's different
Okay.
every grade. And Julie,
Because
feel free to jump in.
Further along, it's just a test they're taking.
It is, but it's not just taking of the test, the scoring of the test is also very time consuming.
Okay.
Thanks, Tara.
Thank you. Could we just go back to the last slide before this? So these next steps, is this relating to elementary only?
This ultimately, it might have some impact on the middle school. At the end of the day, students in the middle school aren't going to end in a different place they are now. So we want to have the same ending point for middle school, but provide appropriate challenge along the way for everyone.
Thank you. And then just as a follow-up to that, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about student movement in middle school. I know that there's a placement that they take in 5th grade and they go into the class. And I know that students do sometimes move from, course 1 to a course 3 in that, but I also sometimes hear that it can be really challenging and that the timing of it is another logistical hurdle to overcome. So can you just talk a little bit about how that works in the middle school model when students are ready to move up to more of a challenge?
It's less common for students to move up than to slow down. So when they do move up, there is a chance that there might have to be some significant shifts to their schedule. And as you know, developmentally, when you're a middle schooler and you have significant shifts to your schedule, it's just not great. The thinking behind this and the research behind this is if we are working with students earlier, we're not going to be in a place where there's the need for as much movement in the middle school because we've done what we needed to do at an earlier place. There will be exceptions, but it should at least reduce the need for middle school movement.
Jill.
On the subject of math, can we talk a little bit more about what you mean when you say differentiation? I think historically we mean, a couple of years ago when we talked about it, was a word problem, and you might have one that was a base level of complexity, a second level, and a third level of complexity. But differentiation could be a lot of things. We have some children who need that problem modified down. We have some children who are mathematically really oriented, who might struggle with it in a word problem base, but could do it, if you stripped out all the words. What do we mean when we say differentiation? Do we mean meeting different learning styles? Do we just simply mean different types of complexity? How are we defining that?
Unfortunately, it's a complex word, as I'm sure you've come to know, that kind of means all of the things.
Yeah.
There's a learning style part to it for sure. There is a component of understanding the complexity of the standard. So there is a range of meeting a standard. You can be highly proficient in a standard. You could meet the standard. You could be below the standard. So you can create opportunities for students to meet the standard because that's the goal. But at the same time, for differentiation, you could be creating more complex problems using more variables, for example. If it's a unit in measurement, you could be giving students a different type of object that they have to measure, or they might need to be estimating where other students aren't. So it just depends. The three large components to differentiation are how the teachers plan. So you don't want to just differentiate when you're in front of them. You want to know who the students are in front of you and how have you planned to meet their needs before. One of the ways that teachers do that in our program is there's a direct instruction that might happen at the beginning, and there's gradual release. So a way one teacher might differentiate is there are some students who need to do some practice problems independently, and they might hold some others back so they can provide some direct instruction while they're doing it. So it means a lot, and I appreciate the question because I think it's one of the most overused and misunderstood words in education. So I don't have a better word to use in this case, but for the purposes of this report, we really just talked about providing high quality instruction to all the students at all times. So we just meeting the needs of everyone that you have.
Okay. How realistic is meeting the needs of everyone that you have? I'm not questioning you on it. I just think that's hard.
And I agree 100%. And that's why that's not going to do it. So we also need opportunities for compacting, and we also need opportunities for acceleration. This is a unique approach. You're not going to find other places that are doing this. But I think this is a model that people will want to emulate because I think it will really meet the needs of our population.
So given that, and that's certainly exciting, the building blocks of it then are like, how do we, it's professional development, it's what does practice look like? How are you making sure that this model is not just a wonderful concept, but something we can truly do on the ground.
Yeah, so we have, the concept is here.
Mhm.
And the reason that we established the vertical team, we said,
Mhm.
okay, let's pause here. We don't have enough teachers that are part of the discussion.
Mhm.
Teachers have to be the biggest voice in this
Mhm.
because they're the ones that are going to deliver it. They're going to know the challenges. They can anticipate what those are.
Mhm.
So the timeline that we've established gives us the space to make sure
Mhm.
we're doing it well and doing it with the voices around the table that need to be there.
Okay, sorry, one more question on, just on the same topic. Do we have teachers who are also, are they only math teachers, or do we also have special education teachers? And I'm saying that because I know they understand sometimes how people learn math differently. And also because they also have to modify materials.
So right now we have math interventionists in addition to
Okay.
classroom teachers. Julie, I can't recall if we have a special education teacher on the vertical team, but we haven't fully established those yet, and we absolutely should. I agree.
John?
Can I just, because I am not present at these meetings, so I just wanted to say something quickly about the Achievers program. And you had mentioned difficulties about, what happens when you don't have it in ninth grade. You mentioned that there was like a real need to get students to be back in with the people they have been in idea with, in eighth grade, for example. In my experience, at least, and in many other people's experience, I think, if you're in idea, there's a high likelihood that you'll be in, for example, an honors class in ninth grade or an accelerated class. And those classes, by design, differentiate, to use the word that no one, that has really no meaning. By having those classes, there's a higher probability that you're going to be in a class with someone who you were in idea with previously. So I think that's something to think about. It might not be as big of a jump than you think. And also, one of the things I'm thinking about is if now the Achievers program is no longer in ninth grade, one of the things that I was just talking with Swaha about is that the ASR program, which starts in 10th grade, many students use their Achievers project concept to feed directly into their ASR research. There's a high correlation between people who are in the Achievers program and people who go on to ASR. So maybe there's some talk about you could start ASR in ninth grade, or you could do some sort of modified prep to that kind of feeds into that program.
Yes, and that's a good point. We also talked about when we're looking at the middle school program, and the reason we're going to more of a project-based learning approach is we want students to have more choice in exploring their passions in middle school. So when they are in the programs at the high school, they're better positioned to have an idea of at least where they might want to go. And I know there's also a desire to not limit just the STEM-minded person, but what about humanities oriented to have a similar program? So that's something else we've talked about.
Thank you. Dennis?
I think kind of expecting my question is how are you going to measure success of this program and or not success?
That's always a great question. So with the math acceleration specifically.
Specifically math, sorry, yes.
So
and kind of building on Joe's point, if you're going to have a lot of differentiation, that becomes difficult to measure. And my fear, if that's the wrong word, is kids can fall through the cracks. And yes, there's lots of on ramps and off ramps, but if a kid is sitting in an off ramp and someone thinks they're at the exit, you're going to be lost. Sorry to use the analogy, Tara, but I don't know how else to say it.
So the good news is there's access to the numbers and how they're moving. So how many students are actually compacting within a unit? How many students are accelerating within a grade level? Because we'll need to see if it's, I guess, worth it is the best way to describe it. Are we seeing results in what are, I'll call them higher stakes tests? Is that doing anything? Do we have more students who are able to access the most accelerated program possible by the time they get to middle school? Would be another indicator of success. The most important piece for me, having sat through all of the focus groups with the students during this time, is elementary students articulated that they did not feel challenged during their math instruction. So this is somewhat qualitative because the focus groups weren't gigantic, but that should not be the case. Kids shouldn't need to leave the classroom to go to another program to feel like they're being challenged throughout the day. And that would be the ultimate indicator for me.
Thank you.
I would also think an indicator would be the stress level in that accelerated class in sixth grade. Because previously, even though these kids needed to be there, there has been a high stress level for those kids because they're going, it's 2.5 years in 1 year.
Yes, it moves at an incredible pace.
Yeah, so I would assume that seeing those kids taking a math class that's just appropriate and not being stressed in sixth grade would be an indicator as well.
Yes.
Thank you, Tara. Dave?
Chris, what are the thoughts on the applicability of this approach to other subject areas outside of mathematics?
Well, the nature of our literacy program, it naturally does that, just the design of how students choose the literature they read. So I think that's in the works. It becomes more complicated with things like science and social studies, especially at the elementary level, because they don't meet with the same regularity and frequency. So math and literacy are daily instructional topics. So there's opportunity to be creative with how you deliver those. It becomes a lot more challenging with science and social studies. Science, there's opportunity because it's with NGSS, it's much more project-based learning as well. But I think it's a good thought and a great question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Jill?
Can I ask you to answer it for foreign languages if you see applicability there?
For foreign languages, I think there's always applicability, but there's also limitations. And it goes back to a schedule. Like if you look at the middle school specifically, when students choose a language, they have to stay with the same language for 3 years because of the team-based approach. And there isn't too much flexibility there. And when we have been flexible in the past, it's been very challenging when students complete 8th grade Spanish as 6th graders, because then we have 2 years of trying to provide them with some type of a hybrid or online instruction that's not always the best quality. So I think you have to balance of how much can we possibly do? And if they are already fluent in that language, is that the language that they should study for their middle school experience? Like there are all those questions to ask.
So I think to your point, I understand the acceleration point of it. I think on the differentiation and curriculum compact, foreign language often, in my experience, lends itself, but I'll defer to you. But I just pose it that I think would be an interesting area to explore this concept when the time comes.
Yes, as soon as we demonstrate our mastery of this model,
Sure.
take it to market.
Fair enough.
Any other thoughts?
No,
Dr. Adams?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the curriculum committee for vetting along the way, and also to Chris and Julie for their work in this capacity. It's nice to see these two topics come to the table, and for implementation, we're on the precipice here of the implementation. So thank you.
And Dr. Bellows also has been a
Of
huge
course.
part of Math Acceleration. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. Thanks for joining us, Julie. We'll move on to update on proposed library renovation designs for Darien High School, Middlesex, and Tokenique. Dr. Adley and Kevin. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, everybody.
So you may recall that the context of this, that this came to the Facilities Committee, and Silver Petroselli were to conduct a review of the libraries. And so they did that. They did it at the last Facilities Committee. That was of the Darien High School, the middle school library, and the Tokenique Library. Through all that discourse, there was a sort of administrative recommendation and consideration by the Facilities Committee to phase certain things in. This is just bringing the board up to speed a little bit, and certainly members of the committee can speak to the issues, but we didn't do a big presentation this evening. It was attached if you wanted to look at it, but this is just contextually putting this in context of everything else we're doing, and should we be doing all of it? What way might we do it if we were doing it, and what things to consider? So this is just a wee update and to apprise the board and for them to do some reflection on it. And Kevin is happy to walk us through.
So that was a terrific introduction, and other than adding the value engineering option from Silver Petroselli, each one of these individual projects would trigger a standalone building committee, which in the throes of HHR and winding down Ox Ridge, I don't know if we have the bandwidth to get that started, but perhaps if we could phase this in a way to coincide with the winding down of HHR, might be a good fit.
So I think, can I just elaborate just a wee tad on that? I think what the discussion that we ended up having was the high school that we would do would be a priority. Thereafter, the middle school, but thereafter the middle school, it seemed there were so many issues still to be discussed for the middle school, not just the library, that would be perhaps be a wee bit short-sighted. And then there is a need. It's the only building that is not air conditioned, for instance. So if you're going to do the library and there's spaces in there that need to be addressed, from theater to cafeteria to other spaces. Actually, there's spaces in general that need to be addressed in terms of, is there enough space in there? I think even that building was originally planned out in the plan to have a wee bit of an expansion. So it was thought that maybe we would do a review of that whole complex once the high school would be done. And then Tokenique is really the last in terms of the need pragmatically of the library. And I know we've done all the other libraries or are in the process of doing all the libraries, but you know, those other schools have lived with portables and all sorts of states of libraries for a long time. Tokenique is in pretty good shape, and it can hang on there for another couple of years, certainly. So those were the three phases that we sort of discussed as possibly way of looking at that. And I'll be happy for the board or facilities committee to contribute to any other discussion.
John.
You know, I kind of grin because with the irony that we got to HHR almost, I believe, through the libraries, if you will. And so I think this greater facility need assessment around the middle school and prioritization around the high school. And, you know, if we look at the greater facility and then implement the libraries around that, I think that's the right approach. So I think we're on target here.
The only thing I would add is, as you go through this process, and I think this came up during the budget cycle, that it's a good sized space up there at the high school that, you know, there's not much else that I think needs to be done at the high school, but I would like to think about, is there a need to incorporate into a library redesign, a wellness center, or what space you think you're going to need? I think we need to anticipate what the needs are going to be up there and what the space requirements are to really have an effective program up there. And I don't want to, you know, spend $3 million on a library and then a year or two later we're looking for space for. I just think as we go forward, it can't just be about a library. It has to be more comprehensive. To your point about middle school, I wouldn't do anything at middle school till we have a broader overview or a facilities review of middle school and you know, Tokenique, I think we just need to get it up to the standards of the other elementary schools. But my only pushback would be on the high school. Just, you know, what else needs to be done up there in terms of a broader project.
If I may just kind of summarize what you just said, do it the way we got to HHR and kind of the way way has been suggested middle school, and kind of same way with the high school. Like, let's just make sure we're not missing anything before we embark on a library project.
Yeah, good.
Agreeing with you both. The only differentiator is that a lot of these things, yes, HHR drove them to a certain extent, but we also had the master plan. And so a lot of the content came from the master plan. There isn't a lot left in the high school from the master plan, but there are things that have come up, and I think there could be new requirements, and that's some of what you're talking about. So I think we want to make sure we don't put a stake in the sand right now and say it's library only library, given that we're a couple of years out. But in terms of the timeline, so just to clarify, basically what you're saying is around the end of HHR, which is about 2 years from now, we'd be looking at running a study for the middle school and potentially kicking off something at the high school and or doing a study of the high school. And then following, then you probably have the middle school build, and then you probably have Tokenique third. Am I recalling that correctly, Kevin?
Yep, that's exactly how I recall it from the facilities meeting.
But with that, Jill, I think, sorry, if I may, I think we were also discussing the master plan, to your point in there, and that's also the point that Kevin and Rich were saying, is that we don't have the bandwidth to redo the master plan as well. But to me, that's step one, and then we go and look at the libraries following the master plan.
What do you mean by we don't have the bandwidth to do a master plan?
Were we going to do a building condition survey or a master plan?
Master plan.
I thought it was a master plan for the middle school and a building condition survey across the district. Am I wrong?
I think that what we talked about in the facilities committee meeting was that that there wasn't an up-to-date master plan for all the facilities across the building. And not having one leads us to the position where we're currently, renovating 4 elementary schools. And, part of the complicating issues is that the middle school has some serious needs, and does this timeline even work for the middle school? Can it wait that long? So having that comprehensive master plan of all the facilities that are incorporated in the district, I think is what gives us a complete picture so that we can avoid having simultaneous projects and also hopefully know what's coming a little better.
I think we have to just balance, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think we just have to balance, and it's a wee bit of an iterative process, the bandwidth to have all these multiple committees, building committees running simultaneously. I mean, it is, I guess, a challenge at the moment. So we just have to be careful about that. In fact, I don't think we can run simultaneously building committees. I'm not sure that's a good idea.
Hey, Rich, what's the cost for an updated facilities plan? The one it's probably what, 7 to 8 years old now?
It is. It would be a 6-figure cost. It would be well over $100,000. There is legislation that's going to require us to do one every 5 years. So the expectation is that we would have to embark on a facility condition survey and master plan within the next few years. The primary focus being at the secondary level, since 4 of the 5 elementaries would, primarily be relatively new.
That's what my thought was, to what extent, or would it be that detailed based on having 1 new elementary school and 3 renovated schools?
So the legislation would require us to still look at those 4 schools.
Okay.
But clearly there wouldn't be much detail to do at Ox Ridge, considering it's a brand new building from the ground up. And there'd be limited items at the HHR buildings, considering the renovations that are going through.
Okay. Tara, did you have a? All right. Katie.
Just one last point on that. That would be something that we would contract out outside, right? So that wouldn't be something that took
No, the last
resources
one,
from our
which was
current
done when I
staff.
was on the board, was done by.
Right.
Was
So
the last
I
one
think-
done by
KG&D.
KG?
So we
KG,
could-
you still
do that
contract it
without
out.
requiring-
However, it does take a significant amount of time from the existing staff
Yes.
to tour the buildings, to have those meetings, and to go over all that information.
And I think at the end of the day, that has given us good guidance as to getting us to where we are now, because we took that and the focus was portables, classroom size. And we really came to the conclusion that Ox Ridge, I mean, it laid out pretty clearly Ox Ridge was the best school in HHR. So, all right.
And I would just say, we need community resources too, and it's
Yes.
not easy to pull these building committees together.
It's
getting
a
more
really good
difficult.
point. Yeah, the building committee consists of, a board member and a first selectman member and a board of not even a board of finance, board of finance member. But over and above that, it's finding folks in the community that have an understanding of a building project.
And the
So-
time.
And the time. Good.
But regardless, we're just tabling this
Yeah.
for now.
Yep, good discussion. Okay. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
All right. We will move on to discussion and possible acceptance of contemplated gift from Any First for first-year robotic teams. Mr. Gregory Darren.
Mr. Darren, thank you. And if you weren't on earlier, I wish the kids good luck in a couple of weeks at Waterbury.
Of course, yeah, we're scheduled for March 11th, so that's
Thank
coming up pretty soon. So New England First offers a $3,500 grant to rookie teams, which is us, just to help us get off the ground and get started. So that's something that we're hoping to get accepted and into our budget for this year.
Great. Thank you how did you come across that? Just by research or?
So we're actually entered into that just by becoming a team for the first year. And the gentleman from Michael Phantom, he's the executive director from New England First, reached out to me, sent me an email and offered up the grant.
Good. Thank you. Thoughts, questions? All right. Thank you very much, Gregory.
Of course.
May I have a motion to accept the contemplated gift from New England First for first-year robotics teams? Julie, second by Dennis. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. We appreciate that and all the work you've done around this program, and we wish the students good luck. Thank you very much.
Of course, we'll keep you posted.
Thank you, Mr. Darren.
Thank you. We're into the accepted gift part of the agenda, right? Discussion and possible
It's a
acceptance.
happy part.
It's the happy, we're in the happy part of the agenda. We spent all the money on the buildings. Now we're getting gifts. Discussion and possible acceptance of the contemplated gift from the Darien Foundation. I don't know if we have anyone joining us from the Darien Foundation, but also Dr. Hatt.
Yep. I'm pleased to share that the board may recall this. This was all the discussion a year or two ago about the classroom at the middle school in the courtyard area. And so the Darien Foundation at that time was pleased to donate money for an architectural design to be done. So we held off on that a little bit until these designs came up. At the facilities committee meeting, we also talked to the architects themselves and said, can this be done standalone from what you have already represented? Is it going to interfere, or is it going to be complicated, or should we hold off? And the feedback we got is that no, this can go forward independently. So this particular amount of money, actually, this has been revised from $7,800 to $8,500. That's what the new quote came in between the time that the packet went out and the foundation have approved that. So essentially, you're not approving the design or even permission for the design. You're approving the donation to the Board of Education so that we will contract out to do a PO with the architect to come back with a drawing, and then at that point you have to approve or not the drawing, whether you want to do it or whether you don't want to do it. So that's the nature of the gift. And
so the gift is for the architectural
Correct.
services to design something.
That's it. Yep.
Then once we have that, it's up to the board how we want to act on that in terms of the cost to implement it, or does it become part of a bigger project up at the middle school?
Well, at this point, the idea that it could stand alone. So if they bring back something that stands alone and is convincing that it doesn't interfere with anything going forward, those would be all questions, and the actual design we may or may not like or otherwise. So at this point, you can't decide to approve something that we haven't designed, right? So in order to get there, we got to get the designs on the table for the board.
I guess I'll just throw it out there. My concern is if they're just talking about what we can and can't do or want to do from a facility standpoint, and Middlesex is up there in terms of what their needs are. This is a incredibly generous gift from the Darien Foundation, and to get to the point of spending $8,500 on architectural drawings, but then not really have a broader plan about Middlesex just gives me pause, because this can probably be done in short order. But if and I get it's a standalone project, but I'm leery of it being a standalone project with all the other stuff that we want to do up there. So that's my 2 cents. John.
So to that concern, to Dr. Adley's comments, I mean, I'm assuming the architect could come back to us and say, this is an area you would never touch for any sort of expansion, and therefore it could be a standalone project. That's what I would be expecting back from the architect, or it might be, and then that's where it causes you pause. But is there a way that you can assess that before you expend the dollars? I guess that's where I'm going with your question.
But to that point is, I guess what I would need to understand personally is, so $8,500 worth of architectural drawings to turn that into an outdoor kind of living school space is, and I guess we would know that, but then we've already spent the $8,500. Is that $100,000? Is it a $500,000? Is it $1 million project? And that's where my concern comes in, because then that's on us to fund that.
What is the intention of the donation? Is it?
The intention
I
of
thought it was to donate the classroom eventually as well.
Yes, it is. It is to eventually provide funds to actually complete the work too. So it's to give a proposal, and they know the proposal may or may not be supported for a variety of reasons. But if it is supported by the board, then they would propose funding the actual project itself.
They say that now, not knowing any concept of the dollars associated with it. Again, whether it's 100 or 500,000.
There was a figure thrown out that they have at least a sense, but if it's significantly above that or otherwise, then it may be off the table again.
Dave.
So first of all, thank you, the Darien Foundation, for proposing a very generous gift. The question I would have, Dr. Adley, is you mentioned they're going to look at, does this not fit, or does this not conflict with possible areas we're going to add? What's the spec we're building it to? What's the target? How are we like, what's the actual goal? Like, what's the outdoor building spec we would use for a classroom, or are we using indoor? Like, what are the ed specs here that would apply? So I'm just wondering what the scope of what the architectural project is going to be, how broad that is, what it encompasses, and if the 8,500 would be sufficient to really cover that. And I mean, it sounds cool to have an outdoor classroom, don't get me wrong, but if we don't know, to Mr. Dennis's point, if we don't really know how we're going to measure success of this, like, that's got to be part of this work here.
I guess, do you have I know this goes back a ways, and I'm sorry, I just can't recall, and we've done a lot of work in the building committees around courtyards and them being outdoor classroom spaces. So is there a spec, for lack of a better word, around the concept of what that classroom is out there? I'm assuming it's a 2 or 3 season classroom, not a.
Yeah, there are, well, again, we want to see what they'll bring back to the table, but there are some general guidelines when they've met with the staff up there, right? And we've had discussions here at Central Services. So there are some general guidelines that they're working under, and the scope of which they're, what they're actually going to do, obviously, for the $8,500, that's all delineated within that scope. If the board needs to see that, I'm happy to provide that for further consideration or otherwise.
Questions? Yes, Jill.
Rusty will know this for sure, but didn't they, isn't there an area of the middle school where they already set it up to add classrooms?
Yes, the back of the building.
Yes,
The back of the building.
The back of the building.
Yeah,
Where the cafeteria is.
okay.
And above that.
So we're pretty sure that moving forward with this it might impede other things we might want to do, but it would not impede classroom space because there's room in the back of the building.
Well, that was the design. I'm not saying that that's where it's going to be, but that's even on the KGND study, that's where it was delineated, yes.
Julie.
Thank you. The courtyard is it's interior, right? It's
Correct,
completely
yes.
enclosed within the building. And it's
Right off
it's
the
not-
library.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space, but it's not a very large space,
Correct.
right? So the idea is to get more usage
Yes.
out of it, but it isn't something, for example, that you would want to open up to be a free space like we're looking at the HHR renovations where you have more kind of common open spaces. So this is to make this a more usable space.
Yes, and it would become instructional in nature also.
Okay.
John.
My last comment is, as long as the donor's well advised that there's a risk to this,
Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy to accept it with much gratitude.
Absolutely.
I agree with that.
Good.
Agreed.
Well said. Thank you, John. All right, we'll move forward. May I have a motion to accept the contemplated gift from the Darien Foundation? Dennis, second by Jill. All those in favor? That is unanimous. And again, thank you for the conversation. And for anyone listening from the Darien Foundation, thank you very much for the generosity. We thoroughly enjoy working with you, and thanks for all that you've done for the school systems. We will move on to discussion and possible acceptance of contemplated gift from the Blue Wave Booster Club. I see Mr. Manfredonia has joined us. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, everyone.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good.
Chris, we can see you in 3D and large on this big screen.
Good thing or a bad thing, but
Got your FCX sweatshirt on.
that's right. So we have tonight here for contemplation a gift from the Blue Wave Booster Club for the DHS softball team for all-weather jackets to be worn during practices or games during inclement weathers, contests or practices. The Booster Club provides the athletic teams at the high school for those nice-to-haves. And this would certainly fall under that category. It would be nice to have the girls outfitted in a jacket to be worn, especially during the early season, during those cold early season games and practices.
Thank you, Chris. Board questions, thoughts? Julie.
Thank you. Does this cover all softball? I don't know if we always have a JV team, but would it cover all players, JV and varsity?
It would, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Good question.
we have both, and this cover both, all players in the program.
Good. Without any further questions, may I have a motion to accept the contemplated gift from the Blue Wave Booster Club? Dennis, second by Jill. All those in favor? That is unanimous. And a big shout out also to the Darien, the Blue Wave Booster Club. Thank you very much for your ongoing generosity and support of all our sports teams. Thank you for spearheading this. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, everybody.
We will move on to discussion on January 2022, 2023 financial report and possible action on proposed budget transfers. Mr. Rudel, I keep looking to my right, front and center.
All right.
Wear that tie all day, Chris, at home?
Always.
Richard.
I can't get him to work in the office. Never made it home.
So
All
I
right.
can't see if the actual PowerPoint's up, but I'm going to assume it's up.
I'll put it up right now.
Michelle's going to put it up.
Can you see it now, Richard?
I can. Just the next slide. So this is the financial report through January. We are forecasting a positive balance of $700,780. With the general education RCs at positive 392,000 and the special education RCs a positive 308,000. We did highlight at Finance Committee, this is before the approved $249,000 of pre-purchases for the fiscal year 24 budget. So in the February report, we will bring transfers forward to cover those pre-purchases, which would bring this projected balance down to about $450,000. If we go to the next slide. The salaries account for a positive 289,000. We do have turnover savings and salary savings of about 53,000. The new custodial and maintenance contract has saved about 60,000. We have some student intern savings of 29,000. A delayed start for the director of mental health and the SSOs at about 122,000. We have a couple of clubs and councils that are not running, and then elementary intramurals that we mentioned. If we go to the next slide, the operating expenses are a positive 8,655. It is primarily due to the China exchange program not running this year. If you go to the next slide, fixed is a positive $109,000. It is primarily attributed to health insurance at a positive 106,000. Again, we did have those three elementary sections that were not needed due to enrollment, and so the health benefits for those were not needed as well. If we go to the next slide. In terms of revenue, we are forecasting a positive 293,000. It is primarily due to excess cost at 339,595. ELP tuition and building rentals are slightly less, and then we have some small positive balance in parking fees, gate receipts, and Medicaid revenue. And then if we go to the next slide, there are no transfers for the month of January.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you to the Finance Committee. Any questions or comments for this report? Thank you, Rich. We'll move on. Any questions on the PAR report? Two appointments. That's good.
It's always good to be on the plus side.
It's always on the plus side, right? Marge, any comments on staffing, hiring? Anything you wanted to add?
No, for the moment, we're fully staffed.
Thank you, Marge. Thank you and your team for all the hard work and the cabinet. I know it's a lot of work to be at that point. Michelle, we will move back to public comment.
Good evening. Anyone in person would like to participate?
We'll
If
move-
anyone on Zoom would like to participate, please use the raised hand option. There are no raised hands.
Thank you. With that, may I have a motion to adjourn? Dennis, second by Jill. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you all very much for those in person and those on Zoom. And again, welcome back. And of course, the texts have been firing up about school tomorrow and icing. We'll have to play that by ear, and Dr. Adley, I'm sure, will be on the phone early morning to discuss it. I know our town does a fantastic job, so we'll pray for a regular.
And we have a
school
lot
day.
of salt this year.
Yeah, we got a lot of salt. Julie, you're gonna let